Welcome back to our Wealthy Mindset, where we talk about all things money, mindset, and business. Today is a special episode. We have Lisa Michaud. She's our first guest. Thank you, Lisa, so much for being here and sharing your story.
Oh my gosh, Cindy, thank you for having me, and what an honor to be your first guest. Thank you. It's like such a pleasure to be here.
Can you tell our listeners more about you, what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wear a couple different hats, probably like you do, like a lot of your listeners do. I am a real estate investor. I'm a wealth and real estate coach and podcast host. My podcast is Golden Girls Podcast, and I'm a mom. But I'm sure we're gonna probably talk about these things, but like all those things didn't just come at once. They've been a journey over decades of becoming all these different layers of myself and hats now that I wear. Um, would you I can share a little bit about like where my journey started into like the coaching and the wealth building, because it certainly wasn't always this way for me. Would you be
Yeah,
interested in me sharing that?
definitely. Yeah, I would love that.
Cool. So, if I like rewind the clock back, like 15, 20 years, when I was in university, I was in a very different position. So I was very lucky that my parents were able to support me a lot through university, but I didn't have a lot of financial education. And that led to me just thinking like, if people have money, they spend it. That was all I really knew how to do. And so for me, I didn't understand the difference between looking rich and being wealthy. And so I just would see something I wanted and I'd buy it. So I was about 21 years old and I had tons of Coach bags. I had Louis Vuitton bags. I had True Religion jeans and Seven for All Mankind. And like some of you maybe are too young to know, but like these were like 300 something dollar jeans, like almost twenty years ago. So like that, I don't even know what that would be in inflation. We should calculate that. Probably like $700
A
jeans.
lot more.
A lot more. And to put that in perspective, like I probably only made like $400 a month. So how I bought like $350 jeans is a whole, I mean, you can probably guess the math wasn't mathing.
Right.
I had two different vehicles that I drove, and at the end of the day, I had a lot of debt. And I got to the point where I was having creditors call and I would just ignore them. I had these credit card bills. I was still able to take out more credit cards, but that train, as they say, the music was starting to stop. And it took for me to be in that position of having the creditors call, having my parents find those statements, not being able to get any more credit cards, for me to realize I really have to change things and make things different. And so, I'm really proud to say that from there, I was able to, start to learn about financial education. I was able to curb my spending, start to learn that difference between making money and looking rich and actually building real wealth. And so that really tipped off the beginning of that journey. I read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, started to loosely implement a few of those things. Honestly, not
Right.
till a lot later, but that was the start of that piece. Um, yeah, so that's kind of the first part of my journey. And then there's a second part to my journey. So fast forward a few more years, I'd gotten responsible about money. I did all the things I was supposed to do. Like I went to school and finished my education. I got a good job with benefits. My fiance and we bought a house together. Then we ended up getting married. We had a second property that was our rental. And like I ticked all of those boxes that made my parents really proud of the things you're supposed to do in life.
Yeah.
And then I had a health scare and I faced the reality that I might only have a year or two left to live.
Oh my gosh.
And I remember that night laying in bed, looking at my husband, and I said, "What do you want to do? What do you want to do if I only have a year or two left to live?" And he's the pragmatic one, and I'm the dreamer. And he's like, "Well, you're the one with the timeline. What do you want to do?" And the first thing came to my mind in that moment was move to Vancouver. Cindy, at this time, I was living in Fort McMurray. I was living in northern Alberta, small town, like minus 40 degrees in the wintertime. And this idea of living in Vancouver was like just completely out there. I grew up coming to Vancouver for concerts, for dance conventions, all these things. And I always loved the city. Like my parents would fall asleep in the room and I'd sneak out to the window and peek out of the lights and listen to the sirens and listen to my Christina Aguilera album and just be like, oh, I want to live here. And of course I couldn't at the time because I was 12. And then, I couldn't live here because my university wasn't here. And then my first
Right.
boyfriend wasn't here. And then my next boyfriend wasn't here. And then, sure enough, I had a job with the benefits. We had the house, we had the rental house. My husband's a small town boy. Vancouver's so expensive. I had this whole list of reasons
Not to.
why I couldn't. Exactly. And it took that health scare for me to really realize and look and say, like, okay, if I really only have a year or two left to live, am I going to continue to listen to these reasons why I can't, or am I going to find a way to make it possible? And so it wasn't an overnight switch. It's not something that you can just like all of a sudden the next day do all the things. But over
Yeah.
time, over the next 6 to 9 months, we ended up getting rid of a lot of stuff, selling one house, selling the other house, quitting our jobs, and finding a new place in Vancouver. And for me, that health scare was really two things. It was getting really intimate with that voice inside myself that is like, what are the desires that I have? What are the things that I want to create? And allowing myself permission to ask, how is it possible? Instead of just assuming I can't. And the second thing, it was this realization that, okay, if step one was figuring out how to keep the money I had and how to not just like spend it all, and step two was learning how to make more of it, I was still missing a part of the picture, which is how do I grow that wealth? How do I protect that wealth? And how do I make that wealth, my money, actually work harder than I am? And so that's been this third phase of my journey that I've been on for the last 9 years. And that's where, learned a lot more about investing, built a multi-million dollar net worth, really got serious about real estate investing. Now, along with my husband, we own over 100 rental doors across Canada, mostly in the multifamily space, mobile home parks, and also some storage. So that's my money evolution, my money journey, and the things I've had to learn along the way through a lot of mistakes, as I'm sure you can hear.
That's amazing. I also wanted to ask, when you moved to Vancouver, did you get a job right away? Did you get into investing? What did that kind of look like? Because it's always scary when you're quitting your job, moving somewhere new, have like no money, nothing really in mind. You're just running with it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think a couple pieces I want to say, and feel free if I miss any of those questions, just like poke me on them.
Yeah,
But it's all building blocks, right? Like,
right,
so we didn't just go, I don't really know anybody that goes from like zero to like 100 doors and multi-million dollars in like 6 to 12 months. That's just not the way that it goes. It's building blocks and it's things that are stacked on top of each other. And so my wealth journey really started like, let's say 4 to 5 years before that health scare. And so a couple of things we did do that I don't know if I would do them the exact same again, but they were things that certainly helped. So, we had been one of the things that I learned, and it's actually something I've had to reverse now that we're much more intentional about growing our real estate portfolio. But I always had this message given to me, which is like, pay down your mortgage as fast as you can. Don't carry
right,
debt. Don't have that. And so that we can talk about why I flipped that and what that looks like now. I think that was an important thing I had to learn, to not just buy Louis Vuittons and
yeah,
True Religion jeans. I had to learn that. But what we had done is we were doubling paying our mortgage every month for years. And so we were able to sell our house. And even though the market had started to go down, we still had some serious equity in that. And so that gave us some breathing room, some space to be able to find the right home in Vancouver, to be able to, support ourselves, things like that. The other
right,
thing is, because we'd been aggressively at least paying down our debt, we were used to living a slightly lower than our full incomes. And so that also made it easier to transition. We weren't used to spending 100% of our income. And therefore, when we took a pay cut, it wasn't as detrimental. Um, and we also did it in phases. And so we said, like, we need 2 out of 3 things to come together for us to make the move: my job, my husband's job, and our house selling. If we could have 2 out of those 3, we could figure out the third down the road. That was the way that we looked at it. And so my husband got a job, our house sold, and we knew with those 2, we could make it work. And I'll tell you, this is the last little piece I'll say here on this move that I think is really powerful is, even though I had that health scare, I still defaulted back into some of my old habits. And one of my old habits was get a job, get a job, get a job.
yeah,
Let's call it a mindset too, right? It's like, I need a job. And so when I started looking for jobs, started like exploring, and I was getting interviews with companies that were on my dream list, and it just never fit. And it was like, I was too experienced for this. I was not enough experienced for that. Like, it just wasn't coming together. And I remember one day looking at job, and it should have been the perfect description. It was like, and this is, 2015, 2016, when it was like, they have a foosball table, they have beer and kombucha on tap. It was like, these are the cool things that I wanted at that season of my life. And I remember just looking at it being like, why am I not excited? And that voice came through again. That same voice that said, I want to move to Vancouver, was the same voice of like, I want to start a business. And I went to business school. That's why I went to business school. I was always interested in like, what could I learn? What could I do? I had an executive coach in my corporate job and was like, I would love to do this one day. But here was the kicker. Just like that move to Vancouver, I kept saying one day. And
Right.
that for me was another wake up call and a realization that like, wow, I could have this scare, essentially light everything on my life on fire to make this big leap and do something completely different, change the trajectory. And I still needed reinforcement to keep that mindset on. And so that's what made me decide to become a coach, to do it sooner than later. Instead of like waiting till I was like, oh, I'll wait till we have $1 million in the bank account. And
Right.
then after that, I was like, we need 2 million. And I was like, I'll wait till my kid grows up. I didn't even have a kid, Cindy, but I was like, I'll wait till my child moves out before I start a business.
You're just keeping
And
yourself
it was
safe.
just exactly. So I took that leap. And that's also why I'm so passionate about coaching, why I love coaching, is because I believe the real power comes not just from the one time shock or the one time thing, but it's consistently changing the way we think about things, the way we listen to our intuition, the way we take action, the habits we do, the way how consistently we push ourselves outside of our comfort zone is more important than the one off big things we do to push ourselves outside of there.
You mentioned something about you and your husband spending less than you're making. A lot of people have the opposite problem where they're overspending what they're making. What type of advice would you give someone that's in that cycle?
I'd say, first of all, I do believe it's important to remove some of the guilt and the shame around it. When I have conversations with others, and when I think back about myself too, one of the biggest reasons why I couldn't face the creditors, why I couldn't look at my bank account and my credit card statement, because I felt embarrassed, I felt ashamed, and I didn't know what to do. It felt like I was just stuck, and I could even just talking about it, like I can feel my voice constricting. I can feel like
Yeah.
it feels like the walls are closing in on me as I think about that. And I think a lot of that comes down to like guilt, fear, shame, sheer. Can we just call it that? Sheer or,
Yeah.
or
Totally.
fame? Fear, shame, and like this feeling like I just could not get out of it. And so I think like I just want to normalize people. And I think that's what, you do with your work, what we're doing with this episode, what I hope to this story will remind people is that like a lot of people have been there and you can get out of it. And we get into debt. Mine happened to be super like, um, not purposeful, to be honest. Like I didn't really think about it. I was just very unconscious in that. But a lot of people get into debt for more real reasons. Like maybe somebody in your family got sick and you took time off to care for them. Maybe you had unexpected things happen to your home, or you didn't get support that you were expecting, or who knows what that looks like. Life throws curveballs, and I just want to say that like you being in that situation, you're not alone. It may or may not be your fault. Even if it is your fault, you can still find a way to get out of it. And so I think that's the first piece, is like we can release some of that shame, release some of that guilt, and just know that like it doesn't matter what you've done before, and that it matters what happens from here on out. So that's the first piece. I think the second piece then is really getting into reality with what's happening. So it's like looking at how much money is coming in and what is your spending looking like, and creating a spending plan. I think I
Yeah.
love that a lot more than budget. But I do think it's really important to understand that we, and I don't think you necessarily need to adhere to like a super strict budget all the time, every single month for the rest of your life. I don't think it has to be that way. But I think when you're in the situation that consistently you're noticing you can't pay your credit card off, you don't have an emergency fund, you're not able to start building wealth, and you know that's what you really want, that's your invitation to start getting in reality with it, and know that you can make a change. So once you come up with that spending plan, I do think I want to also mention this. I think sometimes hard decisions have to be made at this point.
Mhm.
And it doesn't mean you have to make these decisions forever, but it does mean that you have to make a change. So, for example, when we first made that move, to give you some numbers, like we took like a 60% pay cut.
Wow.
60%, like that. It was and we were making good money. I'll be really honest about that. We were
Yeah.
making, a couple $100,000 a year. But like that was also like tens of thousands of dollars a month less that we were making. It was
Yeah.
very significant. And it hasn't stayed that way. Like it's come back up in many ways. We've been able to build wealth, we've been able to do things. But I think it's important to recognize that like sometimes you have to make short-term sacrifices or even medium-term sacrifices to get what you want long-term. One of the biggest things I think people don't talk about enough is like where you live and what the cost of housing is.
Right.
And I
Yeah.
say that as someone who lives in Vancouver, and like I made that flip. And one of the questions I had to think about was what sacrifices am I willing to make to live here? Because there was like I couldn't continue to do a lot of the other spending that I did when I lived in Fort McMurray if I was going to live in Vancouver, and I was willing to make that trade off. I think, excuse me, if I back up 5 years before that, I also made the decision I couldn't have the life I wanted to live if I stayed living in my small town on Vancouver Island. I had to move to Fort McMurray to be able to get myself out of that financial situation, to be able to make more money than I was spending, to be able to be in a place that was higher cost of living, but also higher salaries. And so I do believe like the things I wish I could wave a magic wand and get us all back to 2024 pricing or even 2015 pricing, but I
Yeah.
can't. And so it's also like that part of it is reality that we may have to think about. Do I have to move to be able to change this? What other career moves can I make? Can I rent out rooms in my house or downsize? Like there's another thing, like we downsized. We had a almost 3,000 square foot house with a triple car garage.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, we live in an amazing place. We were able to, I love our condo. We have a 3 bedroom condo. It's a 2 level penthouse. It's great, but it wasn't like $3 or $4 million home. It was something that was within our price range, within our budget. And so I think it's all relative. And I think it's important to know what you're trying to achieve long term and allow that to guide and motivate you to make the changes, the I use the word sacrifices, but I honestly think it's just consciously choosing something different. And if you're making the right ones, it doesn't feel like as much of a sacrifice.
Wow. That's incredible. So inspiring. And did you have like mentors or people that were doing similar things that you kind of looked up to or connected with? Because I know the whole like journey can be like very isolating and lonely too.
Yes, I wish this was. I feel very old saying this, but I'm like, this was like, this was in
Before social
2000, like,
media?
we're talking about like 2000. Yes, there was no social media. I want to say near like maybe like podcasts were like a tiny bit of a thing. There wasn't like this, there wasn't really, there was a couple blogs. I really had to lean on books. And the
Mhm.
reason why I'm so passionate now about sharing on social media, about, being on podcasts like this, about my own podcast is that my journey took, I mean, I'm still on it in some ways, but it was like a 15, 20-year journey that I've been on in terms of like rewiring my money story and figuring out how to make more money, figuring out then how to keep it, protect it, and how to grow it. I believe that that time frame can be significantly shortened for people and a lot easier and a lot less lonely if you lean on others. But that just wasn't available. What we did do, I did try and have conversations with some friends. That can be really hard to do.
Yeah.
But if like slowly, I was able to kind of piece things together. So like we read a great book that a friend recommended about real estate investing in Canada, and we read that, we devoured it, and we got moving on that. One thing I will say, which is actually, this was the catalyst for me starting a mastermind, is me and some girlfriends would meet around on a Friday night. We'd pick one Friday night a month. We'd all hang out. We'd drink some wine and we'd talk about our goals. And we would ask each other and challenge each other and kind of informally coach each other. And that was such a huge catalyst too. That happened like right around that time of me deciding to make the move and having to go through like the job question, the house question, and where were we, what could
Right.
we actually live in Vancouver, and all those pieces. So like having that community support, now it's a lot easier. Like back then, it was really hard to find four people that wanted to have these kinds of conversations on a Friday night. Most
Yeah.
people are not interested. And so that's where the power of a mastermind, you can like go online and find so many options where people organize it for you, people structure, people know what works. They help you find their like-minded people. That didn't exist in my world 10 years ago or 12 years ago. So I would say there was like pieces of it, and like held on to every piece I could, but I do believe it is so much easier because those are the things. And you asked me this question, the things that I'm sharing, these were actually the catalysts. These were the things that helped me make and fix that crux of my problem. They were like the dominoes that knocked over all the other dominoes. Those couple key pieces of information, rereading Rich Dad Poor Dad, reading the real estate investing book, meeting with friends to help me along the way, finding like the right lawyer in town that could help us. Like these little pieces. Another great book, The Millionaire Teacher, that my friend introduced me to. Creating a net worth statement. Again, my friend told me, like, he's like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
updating my net worth statement. I was like, oh, I don't have one of those. Maybe I should.
Yeah.
Like these little pieces, like those are the dominoes that now I tell other people to do. Now I'm like, learn about this, get a net worth statement, like get your spending plan.
Yeah.
It did not come from me just sitting there hoping I'd get the information, because
You're kind
I
of
didn't
piecing
know
things
it.
together.
And how I know I didn't have enough on my own to get out of it is that, in the beginning, I didn't know enough to get out of debt because I was in it. And I didn't know how to grow wealth and build wealth because I hadn't already done it. So that is always a really good clue that if you don't already have what you want, it means you don't have enough yet. It could be knowledge, it could be support, it could be mentorship, it could be guidance, it could be community accountability, it could be many different things. But what if you don't have everything it takes to get there, or you would already have it?
Wow, that's so powerful.
It also sounds confronting, it sounds harsh, but I
Yeah.
mean it from a place of inspiration. And just because you don't have it doesn't mean you can't get it. You always can. And there's so many ways now to get it. But I do believe a part of it is also this reality. And I would rather people hear it now that you don't have everything you need yet, so that you go get started getting it, rather than just telling yourself things like, oh, one day I'll get to binge watching this, or one day I'll reach out to the accountant, or one day I will,
Yeah.
like, no, you need to do it now. Because
No.
if you had those skills, if you had the tools, if you had the knowledge, you would already have the thing you want.
Totally. Yeah. And I feel like a lot of people are just comparing their lives to people on social media. And like you mentioned, you have 100 doors, but I've never seen you like glamorize your life or show anything. You always mention that like you take the train, Uber, and stuff. You don't even have a car.
I have a car, but do you want to know the real story about my car?
Yeah.
My car is 23 years old.
Wow.
My car might be older than somebody listening to this podcast. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, like, I remember there's been people in my life, and I think now what's really beautiful is we have podcasts and social media and YouTube videos to help fill in those gaps, or authors of books. But because in my life, if I look back, there was only like one or two people that I knew that actually had wealth in my life. Now you can go online and see a lot of it. Unfortunately, the tough thing about social media and that is that it's really hard to discern what's real and what isn't.
So true.
Because if you looked back at me in 2007, 8, 9, when I had all the jeans, all the purses, all the cars, you would also think, wow, she's doing really well. I need to learn from her. And so it is a bit hard to discern. But one of the things that I know is that from building wealth, the more of it that you actually understand and build, it takes time. Like nobody is an overnight success. Like nobody goes from zero to very few. Let me say this: very, very, very few people go from like zero to a million or a couple million in less than like 5 years. Like there's the odd story. Like there's the Tara Boshes from Smart Suites who goes from zero to, I think it's three,
Yeah.
sold her company for 350 million. But there's a reason why, like, that is like, she is the exception. She is not the
Right.
rule,
She
right?
was also on Dragon's Den too.
Yes, yes, yeah. So like there's the exceptions, but that's not the typical person. The majority of people are building wealth over time, slowly. And once you know what it takes to build wealth, I think you're really intentional about how you spend it, what you spend it on, because that's what allows you to then choose, I'm going to spend on this and I'm going to take, or actually the other way around. They know what they're trying to create. And so they put aside first what they want to invest to make that a reality and then spend what's left, as opposed to the other way around. So yeah, I'm really happy to de-influence. Like my car is 23 years old. Oh, the sweater I'm wearing and actually the pants are both from a clothing swap. Most of my clothes right now has been from clothing swaps. And I think that has got to be one of the most underrated things out there. Fast fashion is something I don't love. I try and stay away from. And so the idea that I can trade my clothes with others is just really hits my values on so many levels. Gosh, like our house, like it's nice, but like we're not updating it every 3 years, 5 years. Like we're taking
Yeah.
that money and we're investing it. I've traveled a lot. I've been to over 37 countries. Like I
Wow.
love to travel. But right now we're in a season of trying to make it so that our money, our passive income can pay for our travel, as opposed to having to work for every vacation, because
Yeah.
that's how you get out of the rat race. That's how you create real wealth. So I haven't been on a lot of fancy vacations in the last like 5, 6, 7 years because it's been intentionally building the real estate. It's been building that asset that over time is going to pay us so that then we can take the vacations. So yeah, I think it's really important to not believe everything you see on social media and remember that building real wealth, it takes time. I don't think it's normal for people to be always shopping, always on vacation, always at nice restaurants, um, always having brand new things in the most luxurious. Like you need a lot of money for that. And most people don't create that very, very, very quickly. And so it's important to look back and you can do this when you're doing your spending plan. Like, what are the most important things that you do really love? Like, and one of the things I often get my clients to do is like when they're creating their spending plan, also create a chart or create two extra columns. One of them being how much did you value this experience? How much is it like? How much did it bring for you? How much did it align with your values? And then on a scale of 1 to 10, how much did it bring to your goals? And that's how you can help discern which spending to prioritize and which ones to get rid of. And so, yeah, the like long-term investing, like, do I love spending, for example, like $10,000 on renovating a unit? Or would I rather spend it on a vacation? Yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely would rather spend it on a vacation. But it really hits on my goal. My goal is to be able to have the option to work or not work as soon as possible.
That makes so much more sense. Like just being intentional with your spending.
Yes,
And it just
exactly.
varies person to person too.
Totally. Like I maybe we should have started with this, but I don't want to throw shade at people for having Coach bags or Louis Vuitton or nice anything nice. Like the reason why I throw shade at my younger self is because when I look at all the things that I've spent money on in my life, those aren't the things that made the most impact. They aren't the things that made me the most happy. And I was just blindly spending because I thought that's what you were supposed to do when you have money. And I thought that's
Yeah.
what it meant to be rich. And I thought that's what I would like. And it wasn't until I paused to really check in that it's like, no, I love adventures. I love travel. I love quality time with people I love. I love having time freedom and being able to, take days off here if I want to, or go meet up with friends on a trip or things like that. Like that is what matters to me. And so that's what I need to prioritize.
Yeah, I feel you on that. I was the same way, like impulse spending, the Louis Vuitton bags, the trips. And when I was working 9 to 5, same thing, spending all my money on like dinner, drinks, just blowing through it, lived at home, didn't really think about like long term. And then it wasn't until I started my business when I lost that consistent paycheck coming in thinking, oh shit, I need to get my life together.
Totally. 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 And I hope that people listening, like, you don't need to have the oh shit moment like we both had. You don't need that. Like, you can change it now.
Yeah, it's all just about like self awareness and just compassion for yourself and not feeling bad for like overspending or putting yourself into debt.
Yes, all of these mistakes, and again, like they might not even be mistakes. Like sometimes things happen, like you lose your job, like
Right.
things happen that aren't always in your control. And so, um, I think it's important. And I'm even joking about like throwing shade. Like
Yeah.
poor baby Lisa, like she didn't know better. And I do have a lot of
Yeah.
compassion. And she didn't know. She tried. and
Yeah.
and now I've learned, but like I wouldn't be the person I am today if I hadn't been through that journey. And so I do have a certain amount of trust and appreciation and love for that version of myself that didn't know better, because if I had grown up with that skill or learned that, I already knew that, like I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't get to have this conversation with you. I wouldn't get to have this impact. I wouldn't realize how precious this conversation is and how many people don't have it, because I would have already had it innately in me. So I
Yeah.
had to go through that to be able to get to where I am. And it's interesting because a lot of people that I work with, um, some of them come to me because their family, a lot of them actually did never had money or were poor spenders themselves. And
Yeah.
so that actually becomes a motivation for them doing things differently in their lives. And so whether that motivation comes from like seeing parents or listening to podcasts or from your own experience, like it doesn't matter. It's just the point is that you got here, that you got to the point where you said, I'm going to
Yeah.
take control of my money. I'm going to take this oh shit moment and I'm going to turn it into being intentional about my money, about spending it in the places that give the most value to me, and about building wealth so that it contributes to my life in the way that's meaningful for me, whether that's helping support my family, my parents, children, whether that's being able to give back to causes we care about, whether that's being able to just retire earlier or work less, like whatever that is, that all comes from making the choice now.
Totally. And I feel like you're going to change the narrative for your daughter, more generations to come because you did the work. And I think
Yes.
that's something people don't realize either. Like you doing the work, working through like your money habits and your money issues and your relationship is going to go so much further with like helping your daughter, your nieces, your sisters, like so many women, you're going to show them what a healthy relationship with money looks like.
Absolutely. I mean, and to be really transparent, I'm still on the journey. Like there's
Yeah.
still lots of things I don't know. Like there's my we're gonna have to talk about this a different time, Cindy, but like my business is a disaster in terms of bookkeeping. Like the real
Yeah.
estate businesses are good. Our personal stuff is all solid. Our estate plan is good, but that one's a dumpster fire. Like that one is
Yeah.
just not good. So there's so many, there's layers, there's pieces, and you don't have to have it all figured out at once. But it's like taking it piece by piece. And that's exactly what we did. That's what everybody who has built successful businesses, careers, wealth is. It's like one step at a time, and each layer builds on top of the other.
Yeah, totally. I always tell women that I'm working with the first step is just like looking at your bank account 30 days straight instead of scrolling on social media. Do that first thing in the morning. It's uncomfortable, but slowly over time, you build a better relationship with your money.
I love that. It's so good. So good. Yeah.
How do you balance like your life, especially like being a mom, being a coach, doing the real estate investments? I know a lot of women thinking like they're moms, they only have so much time in a day. It's like that all or nothing kind of mindset. I know there's no such thing as like work life balance, like in different stages of your life, some things are going to get more priority. Like, how do you kind of navigate through that?
Yeah. I so appreciate, I think we have to have more conversations like this.
Mhm.
I don't do it all. I don't do it all myself, and I
Yeah.
don't do it all well. um, I think one of the most powerful things you can do is knowing what you're trying to achieve in this season. Like, and this is where goal setting, I'm so passionate. My podcast is called Goal Den Girls Podcast. I have a goal setting planner. I've worked a lot with women around their goals because I believe that's the foundation. When you know what's important to you, what you're trying to achieve, whether it's 1 year, 6 months, 5 years, or 25 years, when you have a goal, and I notice I didn't say all your goals, I said like
Yeah.
a focus point. When you know that, you can then use that. And this is what I do. I use that as a filter for what I'm prioritizing in my months, my weeks, and my days. So your goal is not just like this thing that you put on a wall and look at or pray to or manifest to or do vision boards around. It's actually a tool to help you make better decisions in the moment and in your days and weeks. So I always am very clear, like, what am I working on? I love having like longer term goals. I also love having 100-day goals. That's usually the framework that I use. What am I
Yeah.
focused on? It could be this quarter. I don't necessarily think the time frame is that what matters as much as that you have it and that you're continuously checking in on it. So you can have a 30-day goal. As long as you check in at the 30 days, that's what
Mhm.
matters. You can have a 100-day goal, check in at the 100 days and refresh. That's what matters.
Yeah.
That process is important. So now working my way backwards, when I know what I'm focusing on, I also then plan my weeks. And that is one of the most valuable things that I do
Mhm.
is I look at my weeks and say, what are the most important things I need to achieve this week to make this goal, this focus happen? I then assign like how much time do I think things are going to take. And they always take like 4 times longer. If I double the time, it'll take
Yeah.
twice as long as that. So this is an imperfect process in terms of like, I don't necessarily check off every single thing every week. But what's more important than checking everything off is that I'm making meaningful progress on the things that matter most to me. And at the end of the day, that's what any system, any strategy is meant to do, is to help you feel like you're making progress and making time for the things that matter most. So that's kind of like the bigger system of how I do it. Let me also share some of the more like tactical what that looks like. And it evolves. I think that's really key. This is why one of the things I do when I plan my weeks, I also reflect what worked and what didn't. And if something has consistently not worked for many weeks, it's like, okay,
Yeah.
I need to fix that, right?
Right.
And I also celebrate. I'm like, these are the things that are good. Like I'm trying this tweak and this is helping. Like I'll give you an example. Like one of the things that I noticed I was dropping a lot was my workouts. And it was like, okay, that's something that I'm usually very consistent on. And so it was like, okay,
Mhm.
I need to come up with a new plan. And so in the past, I do a lot of paid classes. So I feel like I don't cancel them as much.
Yeah.
But this season is requiring me to not necessarily have 10 hours a week that I can take out for exercise. So because of I noticed that I'm like, I'm not able to do this 10 hours a week to like get to the class and do the class and then come home and do the shower and stop
Yeah.
sweating and all the things. Okay, I need to bite size this. So then I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna go for 2 15-minute workouts a week. If I can do 2 15-minute weight workouts a week, I'm happy. So I did
Right.
that for like 2 3 weeks, and then now I'm up to 3 times a week, and it's like rebuilding that. And I'm like,
Slowly kind of building up to it.
exactly. And I'm like doing it at home. And it's like, what can I do in this season? Because health is really important to me. It is a value of mine. I'm not willing to just let it drop,
Yeah.
but I may not be able to do it to like the, 10 hours a week that I was doing it. How can I make that bite sized? Another piece that I do is I try and outsource, and I've done this in various ways. In our business, I'll tell you this with real estate. We made a lot of mistakes. There's a lot of things we didn't know. One of the things we did know somehow inherently is to hire a property manager. A lot of times, this is a mistake I see a lot of people making with real estate is they just try and manage it themselves. But it
Right.
does a
Yeah.
few things. Number one, I'm not saying you can never manage it yourself. If you have like one, maybe it's like, close to you, it might be easy enough. But I feel like when you are managing it yourself, you're not actually buying back your time. You're not getting that time back. And it becomes another job, not an investment. And there is
Yeah.
a distinction there. I don't think anything is ever 100% hands off. It always takes some time. But if you are having to screen through tenants, if you're having to do inspections, if you're having to even like deposit rent checks, all those kinds of things, that is taking away from your ability to make money in other areas. And so, if you're like, I absolutely hate my job, I do want to be a property manager, then cool, that's different. But for most people, we're looking for our investments to make money for us. And so we have 3 different property managers because we invest in 3 different locations, and they take care of all of the day to day. With our property manager, we have the majority of our properties. We meet with them once a month with the team and
Yeah.
check in and like go through the list. And like that really helps to simplify. And there's no way we could have scaled up our portfolio if we were doing all the day to day stuff. So it really is about getting to outsourcing and also like why. And for us, it was like, we want to grow, we want to build this. And yes, it'll
Yeah.
be less profitable it'll be less profitable. It just will be. But it also forces us to be way more discerning in terms of what properties we buy and we don't buy, because kind of like you said, we have to pay that property manager. And so we have to make sure that the deals we
Yeah.
buy have that extra buffer. So it makes us more discerning. Around the house, try to get, I'm not super consistent at this, but I am more and more as the years go by, like having somebody help with the deep cleans on the house, like once a
Right.
month, having
Yeah.
somebody come in, like, because I would rather spend that time with my daughter or my husband or resting or enjoying life than I need to spending, 6 hours trying
Cleaning
to
the
deep
house.
clean the house, right? Meals. I've been doing pre-made meals a lot over the last like 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
So my husband also works away. So he still works away about 2 weeks a month and is home for the other 2 weeks, which means that I'm on my own solo parenting. So I've had to get really good at this. So pre-made meals, it can be a delivery service, not being shy about spending more for like the pre-washed stuff at the store or the
Yeah.
pre-chopped stuff. I've recently tried, like there's actually people I've had like come into my house and they'll use my food and like prep it for me. And then I can get
Oh
an
wow.
entire week's worth of food. And a lot of these things I thought were like, maybe we can also touch on mindset here. Like a lot of these things I thought were way down the road. Like I'll speak to the meal piece, because one of the things, if I look at my big vision board of like, I would have a private chef, that would be the best thing ever.
I
Like,
remember you mentioned that in one of the masterminds.
yes, exactly. And so kind of in my head was like, okay, I probably need about like $80,000 a year to have a private chef. Like, first of all, I never looked into it. I just like made that number out of thin air. It was just like, oh, 80,000 sounds like it. Like, put it over
Yeah.
here for when I'm making millions. And this is where, COVID really made me have to change things, because March of 2020, I all of a sudden had no support. I need to figure out a way to make this happen. And so I
Yeah.
started looking into like, okay, what if I just did like what if I just did like takeout and like, okay, all of a sudden, like it solves the problem, me not cooking. Um, and that was like several $100s a week. And it was like, okay, that might be like a little bit too much if I'm spending like $800 a week for myself for food.
Yeah.
But then I started looking at like pre-made meals, and there were some options that were like $120 a week or $200 a week, depending on like, was it for me? Was it for everybody? What does that look like? And I was able to again look at my budget and be like, okay, if I didn't get takeout, and if I'm maybe not doing like this many like outside classes and I go for walks, so I'm doing swimming or at home yoga, could I dial that back and put that money into where it would really help me right now, which is with meals and meal planning. And so I think like, we've talked about this, like outsourcing doesn't have to be I do all my cleaning myself, or
Yeah.
I have a full-time in-house
Cleaner.
staff. I cook all my food, or I have a private chef. Like, I have no childcare. I have full-time nannies 24/7. Like, there are dials to this, right? It's like,
Right.
can I get a cleaner once a week, once a month? What does that look like? Can I get meals two weeks a month or a couple days a week? Can I get maybe if you're an entrepreneur and you have a baby, like, can I get a night nurse one night a week so I can get a good sleep, or 2 nights a week? Like,
Yeah.
there's dials to all these things, and I just want to say, like, nobody does it all on their own. I know a lot of people. I talk to a lot of people. I really love having nitty gritty conversations with people. Nobody that has two working parents and children is doing it all themselves and thriving. Like, people are
Right.
either struggling, or they are outsourcing a whole bunch of it, or they have family or like some sort of free support. But like, it is essential to outsource to get help. And it, again, it doesn't have to be forever, but like in certain seasons of life, I think that is so, so, so important.
That's so helpful. Even for myself right now, I started doing meal prep and like getting cleaner coming in once a month, and it makes a huge difference.
Huge difference. Yeah. One of the other things I've been playing with too, I is like a family helper. So it started out with when I would have a babysitter come. It was a friend that would help babysit. I'd get her to stay for even just like an extra 20, 30 minutes and help me put away laundry, or help me like unload the dishwasher when my husband's away. And it was
Yeah.
like these little things that were like, it's not like that takes up that much time, but over time, as your life becomes more complex, as you have businesses, investments, families, as you just like realize that your time is precious and it can be better spent on other things,
Right.
there's
Yeah.
dials you can pull, and like these little like 20-minute things can add up so quickly. And so this idea of having like a family helper too to help out can be a game changer, or sending your laundry out, or like that kind of thing can make a really big difference.
Those are such good ideas.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been a journey, but I really think it makes a difference.
What would what advice would you give someone that wants to get into real estate? I know you mentioned having like a budget plan, being intentional, but what's like one small little action someone can take today?
Okay, let's assume you have a spending plan in place, because I think that's the first piece. It really is
Right.
knowing where's your money going and making sure that you have like that in place, because otherwise you are just, any investment you make, it's like pouring water into a strainer. It's just going to come out. So you have to make sure that you're not pouring your money and you're not having investments come into a strainer, that they're going into a pot that you can continue to grow. So that is, if you don't have your financial foundation in place in terms of your spending plan, that is your first step. That is the most important thing, because otherwise any money you make, and trust me, the more money you make, the more you're going to spend. It's just going
Mhm.
to leak right through. It's not going to solve your problem there. Um, what you can do is obviously make more money, but cut your expenses, but you have to have awareness of that. So that's step one. Let's talk about, what if you have that in place and you're interested in real estate investing. Um, I believe you should have some sort of interest in it and want to be a part of it. I will say this. I think the first piece is to start, first of all, understanding what purpose you want real estate to serve in your life. Are you looking for more short-term cash flow? Are you looking for like a vacation property? Are you looking to retire earlier? Are you looking to retire more comfortably? Are you looking like, what are you looking to help set your children up for success? Like, what are you
Mhm.
trying to achieve? Are you and there are some situations, not a lot, but there's some where you can use real estate to make more money now. But if you understand what you're trying to achieve, that is the most important part, because the next step is to then start to learn about some different strategies. But if you don't know what you're trying to achieve in real estate,
Yeah.
it's going to be super overwhelming, because there are a lot of strategies out there. And trust me, we've tried a lot of them. There's rent to
Yeah.
own, there's short-term rentals, there's midterm rentals. You can do furnished, unfurnished, you can do long-term rentals, you can do multifamily, you can do single family homes, you can do like land, you can do land development, you can
Mhm.
do joint ventures, you can do fix and flips. These are just a few of the things you can do that I just named. And it is going to get very overwhelming to figure out which one is going to work for you if you don't know what your definition of working for you is. So, first, understand what purpose would real estate serve for you in your life. For us, when we first got started, I joke around that we started as accidental landlords. Troy had a home, and
Mhm.
we decided to buy a house together, and we had the question was like, should we keep this or should we not? And our determining factor was, we want to have more money in retirement. We want to have a more comfortable, more secure, more stable retirement. I was such a good girl back then.
Yeah.
My parents would have been so proud. And so it was like, you know what? We could either take $300,000 now, or we could turn this into an asset that in 20 years is all paid off and
Yeah.
pays us like an extra $3,000 to $5,000 a month in retirement. And that was our motivation. It was like, we don't need this money now.
Mhm.
And frankly, if we had it now, we'd probably just buy a bigger house and it wouldn't actually do anything
Yeah.
meaningful. So the purpose of this real estate is in retirement. We're going to be able to have a more stable retirement in case our pensions don't work out or CPP or all these things. And so that fit that purpose and how make that decision a lot easier. Now what we've started to do, there's been other times, like for example, we've tried to just kind of create, like we want to be able to invest in more properties, but we need to come up with that capital quicker. And so that's where something like
Mhm.
rent to own helped out. It helped us to be able to build up equity and build up some down payment amounts quicker. And it was not a long-term strategy. It was not going to help us with retirement right away, but it would help us get, like, I think the first deal, maybe we got like 30 to 50,000 and the next deal got us like 50 to 75,000. All of a sudden, over 2 to 3 years, we had an extra 120, $130,000 that then we could put that into a more longer term asset.
Mhm.
So it's understanding what you're trying to achieve and then also getting a sense of like, what are your resources? What are your, like, how much time do you have? What's your appetite?
Yeah.
What's your timeline on that? And once you have that in place, and we call that our personal real estate blueprint, it's something we go through with all of our clients. Then we look at what's the right strategy. And then you can start to learn about strategies. But if you just hop right into, I just want to learn about all the real estate things, it's going to be very overwhelming. You're not going to know where to start. You need to know what you're trying to achieve, what your time, like how much time you have, how much time available you have, what are some of your strengths, how much money you have, so that when you know that, then you can learn about these
Mhm.
opportunities and the different strategies. And you'll be able to filter to be like, you know what? I actually don't want to be answering my phone at all hours of the day,
Yeah.
telling people what's the best restaurant or helping them get back into a unit. Like short-term rentals, not for me, right? Or
Right.
I don't have a lot of money right now, but I have a lot of connections, and so I could do a joint venture partner with somebody.
Mhm.
And so, like, you learn more about that strategy. But if you don't know those things first, it's going to be very overwhelming. So that's your first step: is know yourself before you start to get educated.
Do you help with like new investors or do you primarily work with like experienced kind of investors?
Both. I would say most of the people that we work with have already have some kind of assets. It could be their home, it could be other investments. Most people are starting with some sort of investments and
Yeah.
resources. Um, and then we're helping them
Mhm.
take it to the next level because a lot of people, like, we've been told to buy a house and to start saving,
Yeah.
but we don't necessarily know like what the right strategies are. We don't know how to grow that in potentially a accelerated way or a more intentional way, an easier, simpler, more strategic way. And so most of the clients that we work with are people who already they've got stable jobs. And I would say this for everybody. You've got to have stable income coming in, or
Yeah.
some sort of assets. You've got your consumer debt under control, could pay it off relatively easily, or you have no consumer debt. And then they're ready to take it, like, how I already own my own home, but I want to get into another a property. What do I do now? Or a lot of our clients have inherited properties or have inherited money. That's, I think, a big thing for millennials right now, are
Yeah.
in that season. And just because you've inherited properties or inherited money doesn't mean you've inherited the strategies or the knowledge or the systems to be able to grow that. And so we work with a lot of clients in that space too, to help them figure out, okay, I've been given this, like, now what do I do to grow it? And how do I potentially help like the next generation? How do I take this gift that's been given to me and
Mhm.
how do I build a legacy out of it? And then there's the odd client that is like extra motivated, that we know is a superstar. Our client that bought a property or removed conditions yesterday, he's one of them. This was his first real estate transaction
Wow.
ever. Yeah. And he bought a triplex. We're so proud of him. It's incredible. But he's a superstar. Like, he was that person that, even though he'd never bought real estate before, he didn't own those assets. He was highly motivated. He was the person that was like, when we usually tell our clients, like, analyze 2 to 3 deals a week or 4 deals a week, he was analyzing like 12. And so we're like, you're a
Wow.
superstar. You can do this. Like, and he was able to jumpstart his progress because of working with mentors, and we could help him through that process. So both, but for the people that are starting with nothing, like, you do have to be extra motivated. You have to work that little bit harder than somebody who already maybe has 100,000 or a couple $100,000 in equity or has done a real estate transaction before. It's going to be a bit different game.
Yeah.
So and we want to work with people that we can set up for success. Like we want to make sure we're not in the business of just taking people's money and then being
Yes.
like, oh, oops, this won't work for you. Sorry. We want
Yeah.
to make sure that we can really support people, which is why we have the checkpoints, which is why we, yeah, there's certain, like I said, those things that we make sure people have in place first. Like
Yeah.
we would never take on a client who was didn't have their income and expenses sorted out first, that had $50,000 in consumer debt and no way to pay that off. Like that's just, again, like I said,
Yes.
that's making people just pour more money into something that's going to drain out in the end and not going to actually support
That
people.
totally makes sense. Yeah. Just more awareness, building up like your budget, your spending plan, and just being intentional on where you want to go.
Yes, exactly. And that's why we hop on calls with people. Like I get people to apply before and I talk to people first. Because two things. Number one, we also partner with a financial planner because we want our clients to have a good overall picture. And so the financial
Yeah.
planner also helps clients. And so we've got that clear criteria of like, before we work with you, here's what you need to have in place to get the most
Yeah.
out of this. But the second thing, and this is also important to say, probably especially for the people in your community, you might not need as much as you think you need, or as much, like you need
Mhm.
definitely need time or money, and you need some of those things. Like I haven't yet figured out a legal way to make money if you don't have money or time. Like that just
Yeah.
doesn't exist. But you might not need as much as you think. Like you may not, especially for those of us in higher cost of living areas, Ontario, BC, Vancouver, especially. Like you might be looking around being like, yeah, but it's going to take me 10 years to have $300,000 for a down payment, right?
Right.
And that's why I love to talk to people because, there's other markets, there's other ways to get started that may not take as much money as you think. Like, for
Yes.
example, the price point on our client's duplex was $262,000
Wow.
for the entire duplex. So, like a 20% down payment. I'm quickly trying to do this math, like, $50 to $60,000 is enough. And obviously you want
Yeah.
to have a buffer, wanting to have plans in case things go different, but that
Yes.
is significantly different than thinking you need to save up, $500,000 for something, right? There's also things like joint venture partnerships where you can partner with people. Let's say, and this is the case that's happened. Like our
Mhm.
clients, sometimes they have parents that are willing to go in and invest if they do the majority of the work. They have wealthy friends. They have fellow entrepreneur friends who are like, I'm making money now. I don't know what to do with it. Like,
Yes.
help me do this, right? Or other friends at corporate that can make money. And so you don't necessarily need as much as you think you do. You may not. And that's why I love to have conversations with people, because I hate to think that someone would be sitting on the sidelines trying to like squirrel away all the money, not realizing there's other opportunities in other markets or other ways to get that funding. Even, for example, accessing equity in your home that you may have that
Right.
you may not have even thought about. So there are creative ways to do it. And that's where the value of working with us and working, I should say, with any mentor is. You don't know what you don't know. And
Right.
you may not think you're ready. But kind of like I had no flipping clue what a private chef would be, would cost. You have no idea what opportunities are available to you until you ask the question. And so I think probably you would agree with this, Cindy, like as a CFO, as an accountant, as a mentor for women building wealth too. Like it's so much better to ask the question and find out what you need to have in place first than to assume you're not ready and then just keep like waiting for this hypothetical time and thinking you need XYZ, these criteria.
Right.
We make up our own rules sometimes, and it's important to actually figure out like, what are the rules of the game? What do I need to have in
Yeah.
place? And have someone teach you, because there's probably other strategies and rules you can have to win this game of money that you don't even know about.
That's so interesting you say that. My dad, he does like buying property, building it, and then selling it. So that's the only way I knew of like getting into real estate. But ever since I met you, like you just created more awareness and I'm like, okay, there's like other ways to get into real estate.
Yes, there are so many ways. Like, yeah, we could do a whole other episode on that. Like, there are so many ways. And and different reasons you would get into them, and different, like,
Yeah.
and it's like matching up, like what is going to work for me, what's going to work for my budget,
Mhm.
what's going to work for my time, my capacity, and how long have I got, and the market, right? Like all these things have to come together.
Right.
But so many people just think it's like deal or just
Yeah.
market, and it's like, no, it's all these pieces coming together to make it work for you. And I love hearing that, Cindy, because I also, for so long, Troy and I would often be like, oh, we heard of somebody that had like 30 doors or 40 doors.
Yeah.
And we're like, how did they do that? We never asked the question. We never like we never asked. We never asked, "Hey, would you mentor me?" We never asked, "What book did you read to get there?" Or what mortgage broker did you work with for the strategy? Like we never asked these questions. We just like kind of were curious and never did anything. And so for many years we just didn't do anything. And so I think there's so much to be said for hearing about these ideas and knowing that they're, like I said, you definitely need to have your financial foundation in place, but there's lots of other ways that you can get into real estate and investing that you probably don't even know about.
What's the best way our listeners can get in touch with you?
The best way to get in touch, I'm on Instagram more often than I should be, for sure. I'm at the Lisa Michaud on Instagram. I do ask me anythings. I offer one-on-one coaching. I do one-off calls, I offer a couple of them a month, and then I have our larger packages too around wealth building and real estate investing. And you can follow along Golden Girls podcast. There's a ton of content there. If you're looking to learn about real estate, hear more about our journey, we have several episodes there. I think episode 33, 35, 50. I got to find a better way to like do this, but there's some great episodes there about real estate. You can hear about our journey, some of the different ways that we've learned to grow a portfolio from one door to now over 100 doors across Canada.
Thanks so much, Lisa, for being here and sharing all the things about real estate, getting into investing. I feel like I've learned so much too, just in this conversation, and I'm sure I'll have you on again.
Cindy, thank you so much for having me. I am just in awe of everything you're creating. I love your passionate heart for helping women build wealth, and I see how much work and effort you put in to really make that a reality for women. So thank you for having me, and thank you for the important work that you're doing.
Thank you, Lisa.